All right, what is going on, fellow Martians? Welcome to another episode of Mixed Martian Arts. My name is Austin Shaper, and this is a show where we explore the topics of UAP, UFC, and World War III. It is early in the morning on Sunday morning, and today's going to be a UAP episode, and there's one topic in particular that I want to discuss today, and this stems from the recent Joe Rogan episode where he had UAP investigator, journalists George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell on. I'm sure you guys know who both those guys are. If not, you really got to catch up on your homework. But anyway, so they were talking at length. I think it was like a just under 3-hour long podcast. I really recommend listening to the entire thing because it was really informative, really just really good. I would recommend you guys check it out. And one of the topics they started to discuss, Jeremy Corbell brought this up, and this is what fascinates me the most in this entire phenomenon. He brought up the point of when he would talk to these intelligence officers and these sources that he has in the government and the military, he said that a lot of them are willing to talk in some forum about the phenomenon, and they're okay with him reporting on some of it, but that when he asks them if they want disclosure, many of them say no, they are not for disclosure on this subject. They are not for revealing this to the American people in its entirety. And he said he always gets stumped by that because he asks them, like, why? What reason would you have for not doing it? And the conclusion he's come to, and this is the same conclusion I've come to as well, there's some reason, he said some gnarly reason, I believe is what he said, that must be why they won't tell us why they're not for disclosure. There must be something like very, very consequential, some grave either consequence of telling us that's probably deeper than, the surface level. Some people could just say, and they discuss this in the podcast, you could just say they don't want to let our adversaries in China and Russia know how much we know, or, something along those lines as for national security against our adversaries, and, we don't want to reveal technology, or we don't want to let these other countries in on how much we know about the phenomenon. I think that's very surface level. I do think that this is, and they discussed this in the episode as well, that there's probably multiple reasons. Maybe it's not just like one reason. But Jeremy Corbell really dove into the idea that there must be some like gnarly, profound reason as to why even the people who are willing to open up about this in some facet in the government still sit there and say they're not for disclosure. And it's not for, in my opinion, this is just me speculating. You guys know, if you watch my show, I'm always open to being wrong, and I never claim to be like an authority or a know-it-all on this subject. I think there's a plethora of people like that in this field who act like they know things for sure. I will say Dr. Stephen Greer. I don't even know why we call him a doctor. He's not a doctor anymore, hasn't been for decades, but he's one person who just speaks in like ultimatums, like everything he says is 100% a fact, and if you disagree with him, you're wrong, and he's right. I think that this phenomenon, I think there's very few people on this planet who actually know the full scope of it. Possibly only in the government and the military, there's probably only a few of them. So when people speak in like ultimatums, like they know, I think it's like, for me, it's a huge turnoff as to me listening to their opinion and taking it seriously. So I'm purely speculating, but I don't think this reason, and that's what really makes me so fascinated about the phenomenon, is that, of course I'm curious about what these beings could look like, what they entail, where they came from, their technology, their origins, all this stuff. But really what fascinates just personally me the most about this is I'm like, what are they hiding? What is the government and governments of the world hiding about this? Because they've done plenty of surveys now, and I think they've stated that over 50% of the population already believes in extraterrestrial life, and a slightly lower percentage than that believes that that extraterrestrial life has already visited us in the past. So it's like the argument that people really go to is one, like the technology, the military wants to keep quiet about it just for the sake of national security. That's one idea. And then two, it's because we couldn't handle the truth. The public couldn't handle the truth, just the knowledge of extraterrestrials and another life form. The world couldn't handle it, and there'd be like a societal meltdown. One, I don't think I agree with that. It would very much so depend on what we found out specifically, but just to say that if we heard about extraterrestrial life, that would be the triggering thing, like nobody would go to their jobs. and the government would cease to be able to function over the people, and all these different things you hear. To me, that's kind of like a fallacy. It doesn't seem true because a lot of people, like kind of the majority of people, I would say at least 50%, according to some studies, already believe that exists. So I don't think you're going to melt people's brains by simply that revelation. Now, what would melt people's brains, it would make people freak out, is if there was a very nefarious or ominous or paradigm-shattering reason why this non-human intelligence has been interacting with us. And as Jeremy alluded to, he is so curious, and I am too. That's really where my fascination stems with this. It's like, what are they hiding? Not just the NHI, but what are the people in power who know about this, the powers that be, who have known about this for decades? And there's been so many leaks to the public, and yet they've still dug their heels in, saying that we are not going to tell the public about this. And even people who are talking to journalists such as Jeremy Corbell, people high up in the government, say, I'm not for disclosure. And I guess I'm here today to just talk about, like, what on earth could that reason be? I'm so fascinated by that. Like, is it due to the fact that the government just doesn't know, and it's extremely scary to let the American public know about this phenomenon when you yourself don't even know what it is? I think that there's an aspect of that that's true, but I think with this many decades that have passed, I mean, if what David Grush alleged to be true, which is, the first known recovery of a craft was in, Italy in 1933, and the American government got a hold of it, I think a decade after. If we've known for that many decades, it's almost 100 years, right? It's like 90 years, 2023. So 90 years we've known about this. There's no way we haven't made some significant headway, at least in the knowledge, maybe not reverse engineering the technology, although you do hear lots of reports of, there's been attempts to reverse engineer them. Bob Lazar even said that in 1989 that they were already flying these things. Humans were attempting to fly these things at the test ranges. And, so they've had so long to deal with this, I guess is my point. And there's no way they haven't figured out a significant piece of the puzzle. Maybe not the entire thing, almost definitely not the entire thing, but for sure they figured out much more than the American public knows, and the public, I guess, in the entire world, not just America. So what is it that they're hiding? What is it that's so consequential, so unsettling, that even after all this time and after all these leaks and even after the public in large believes that it's true already, why are their heels still so firmly dug in? I mean, we already saw they denied David Grush the SCIF to be able to share the classified intelligence with some of the members of Congress. And so my point is the attempts to keep this under the rug are still going on. They're ongoing. We know AARO, the sham of an organization put in place by the government to investigate this phenomenon, is coming up with no conclusions whatsoever. And so, one, it's just so bizarre to see people like John Kirby and the spokesman for the Biden administration. It's so weird to see them come on camera and try to talk about this and try to kind of make light of it, but also say we take it seriously. But then the way they take it seriously is because it's been interfering with our training and could pose a potential threat to aviation, to planes, and that's the risk. And that's the angle they always come at it from when they're asked about it directly on camera, on the podium. They're asked about this phenomenon and how seriously they take it, and it's always to do with flight risk, which is hilarious to me, because while that is a risk, that is the least of your problems. If you could put it on a list in order of importance of why this is a big deal, that there's this technology just floating at will all over the world around our nuclear weapons, around our military bases, around our training exercises, around the civilian population, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and all they can come up with is, these things, these objects pose a threat to aviation risk. It's I find that to be so comical, and it's hilarious to see them try to navigate through this without admitting oh, by the way, there's non-human intelligence just going around the world doing as they please. There's nothing we can do to stop them. They're clearly more powerful than us in every aspect. Oh, go about your day, Americans. Don't worry about it. We'll make sure your plane don't crash into one of them, and that's all you guys have to worry about. I find that to be hilarious, and it's just absolutely pitiful. And to see their heels dug in after 90 years this deep still says to me that there's a big, big reason, like something so big that it would shatter the paradigm of society, the fabric of it, and the thin veneer that we live under of safety and protection of the government would probably be null and void overnight. Should we learn what it is that a few members of these people in the powers that be, or the government, or whoever it is that knows this knows, whatever they're privy to. If the American population and the population in the rest of the world was privy to it, I think this would be earth-shattering. And I don't think it's just the fact that they exist. I think a lot of people already know that they exist, or at least believe that they exist in some facet, whether they're visiting or not visiting. There's just been too many damn sightings, too many reports, even official videos released from the government at this point. And yeah, it's mind-blowing. I would be very curious to hear your guys' input on this, because the speculation runs wild. We heard Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp mention that John Lear, their previous buddy who followed this subject very closely, he was buddies with Bob Lazar, and he passed away last year. And he referred to like what this non-human intelligence is doing here as like basically kind of like harvesting our souls, and that they don't have the ability to experience like we do, and that they're kind of like ripening our souls by letting us have all these experiences down here. And then, I guess when we die or whatever happens to us, they take our soul and use it to be able to experience life as a human. So containers of souls is, what we are, is that theory. I think that's out there for me, man. I can't even really put that in mind. I've never thought of that for even a second before. I've always thought of it as either these things are like demons in some regard, who have just kind of always been hovering over the planet and guiding civilization in their nefarious ways. Maybe they're harvesting us in some way genetically to modify themselves or continue prolong their species, procreate where they can't do it themselves. Or, they've just been living within the earth, maybe after some natural disaster, and I don't know how they get a hold of this technology, but they have it. So they've kind of been living, within the earth, and they don't want to reveal themselves, thinking that it might mess up society, and, our evolution would greatly be impacted by the revelation of them. I don't know. There's a million reasons, but I never really thought for even a moment about this thing with the souls. I don't know if I think we're out in la-la land on that speculation, but again, we're talking about freaking non-human intelligence that just flies around our world, and, there's thousands of reports of seeing them, the beings, all kinds of abductions. It just goes on and on. So I guess we're already in crazy land, if you want to talk like that. So who am I to discount that theory? So anything is on the table at this point because of how little we know as, civilians. But I think there must be something super nefarious as to why they're not telling us. I'm very curious what options you guys think are on the table. I think, either these things have just been around guiding society, or it's due to the fact that maybe they are hostile and they just haven't done anything kinetic against us at a large scale yet for whatever reason. And the American government, maybe in the governments around the world, maybe have knowledge about some impending date. You always hear this 2027 date. I don't really give any credibility to the dates. I kind of gave up on that back in 2012 with the whole Mayan calendar ending. That was kind of the last of me believing dates. But at the same time, maybe they know of some impending attack or a major contact event, and they're trying to keep it under wraps until they feel like we're more prepared for it. And that's why they kind of slowly are indoctrinating us with this information and revealing it to us over time with these hearings. That would kind of tie into the managed disclosure theory and tying into that legislation that potentially is going to be passed in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024, where they signed that bill at the end of the year, saying that there's a managed disclosure plan in 2023, 2024. So could it be related to that? They're just trying to reveal this to us over time. Is it possible these beings have given the governments a deadline as to when they can reveal themselves? Man, my mind runs wild, because more than anything, more than I'm curious about the freaking technology, more than I'm curious about the beings or where they came from or where they live, what I am so curious about, I guess, is the drama side of it, is just what is the government hiding about it? What do they know that they are like desperate and they'll kill, they'll cover up, they'll lie, they'll obfuscate, they'll do, I don't know how to pronounce that word. They'll do anything possible for this not to come out. What did they learn in their studies over the past 90 years? Was it that beings came and talked to them? We've heard of presidents interacting with these beings in the past. We don't know how true it is. We've heard of all kinds of crazy stuff. But what is so big that we can't know about it? And I guess part two of that would be, do you think we're going to find out about it in our lifetime? I tend to think that the cat can only be kept in the bag on this secret for so long. It's been just under 100 years now. A human lifetime is relatively short, so I guess you can say this has been roughly one full human lifetime that we haven't known about it. So while it may feel like a long time, decades and decades for us, it's really only been one human lifetime, and maybe from these beings' perspective or even the American government's perspective, that's not that long, and maybe they need a long time, like hundreds of years, to be able to reveal this to us safely, so that there's not one climactic event where the disclosure happens maybe against their will, or more comes out than they're willing to admit. That's kind of the whole problem with the theory of, why don't they just tell us, not disclosure, but confirmation. They don't tell us about the technology, what it does, or the beings, what they do, anything about that. They just tell us, yes, we know there is non-human intelligence here. Boom, that's it. And the speculation about that has always been the big issue with that would be that, okay, the population is never going to shut up. If you tell us even one iota of this is true for a fact, say the president's on the podium or he's in the White House lawn, and he admits, he just confirms this non-human intelligence is real, and then he says, okay, but the rest of it's national security related, so we can't reveal anything else. Do you think the population, do you think the journalists, do you think the news is going to just say, okay, we respect that and give up? No. They're going to never give up. It's going to make everybody in the world is going to be a ufologist at that point, and that's absolutely probably a terrifying idea to the American government, because right now it's kind of like this niche thing where like some people like you and I have a deep fascination with it. I don't know how you personally couldn't be fascinated with this. This is like one of, if not the most interesting topics to discuss, because the implications of it and just like how earth-shattering this whole situation is. But I don't see a way for them to confirm the existence of this non-human intelligence without opening up Pandora's box where the cat will not go back in the bag. So that's the issue in telling us anything. Are we going to find out whatever this reason is at some point? I don't know. I think the governments of the world are so good and so nefarious. I think they're so good at disinformation, and kind of like, even if they have to admit a truth, even if they have to admit something, they find a way to like downgrade it or play it off or distract us with something else while they release it. They've got a really good playbook they've developed over the decades. And so I don't know if I'm optimistic that they're going to give us answers, but I'm cautiously optimistic that this is a secret so big, and that some of these, I don't think everybody's on the same team in the government. I don't think everybody is for keeping this secret. Clearly, people like David Grush and others want this out. So I think that there's competing factions in regards to disclosure in the government right now. So I think eventually this has to leak in a big way. And when it does, it's going to open up the floodgates. And then I do think maybe we could get some answers as to why the government's keeping this secret. I think it's a scary situation, and we see this question on UFO Twitter often, and it always sparks my thinking of, they always do these little polls on UFO Twitter, and one of them, the common ones you see, is like, if we found out that the non-human intelligence is here for a very bad reason, like say they're harvesting us, killing us, or they're going to end the world, or they're going to take over our planet or end our way of life, something like that, would you still want to know the truth, or would it be better living in ignorance? My opinion 100% is it's better to know the truth. And even if it was destabilizing to society, which it very well could be, I still want the answers, because it's completely cruel to keep this from us, no matter what it is. It's absolutely inhumane to keep this from us, because it has such big implications on even the way we think and go about our day and the way we perceive life. A lot of that could change for the worse or the better by the revelation of the truth of this, whatever that truth may be. I don't know what that truth is. I've always sat on this show and say I have no idea what's going on. I'm just so fascinated because there's a reality to it. What that reality is, I have no answers, guys. Truly, I'm not an expert, and I don't know if there's many experts out there. There's a lot of people on YouTube, a lot of shows out there who claim to be experts. And the funny part about that is a lot of them are saying entirely different things. You know, I know Jeremy Corbell says that he doesn't believe that we have reverse engineered craft. We haven't really made a significant breakthrough in the technology due to the compartmentalization, and that we're not really flying these around at scale. Where you have people like Dr. Greer says, oh, the majority of craft that people see are human-made. They're doing black ops operations with drugs and human trafficking. That's what he says. So it's like completely different ends of the spectrum, both completely convinced of their points. I tend to agree with what Jeremy Corbell says. He seems to be a lot more careful about what he says and admit when he doesn't know something, whereas Stephen Greer, though he does have some good points about the free energy and why the governments would want to keep this secret, he goes off into Narnia, man. He believes he knows these aliens by their first name. He believes he saved the president from assassination. He believes he can levitate. He believes so many crazy things that like I said, I'm extremely skeptical of people who claim to be an expert. There's probably a few experts out there in the world. Many of them are probably entirely in secret, and we have probably never even heard what they had to say. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. If you guys appreciate this type of content, I'm trying to stay consistent on here. Give me a subscribe. Just hit that button below. I appreciate that. That's a free and quick, easy way to support my channel. If you guys are listening on the audio format only, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, just click follow and leave me a 5-star review. And lastly, if you'd like to be a part of the conversation daily, I've got a very small but growing community on Discord at Mixed Martial Arts. You can find the link in the description of this video. We just ask questions, share breaking news stories, share our opinions, and just kind of discuss all of these three subcategories: UFOs, UFC, and World War III, with anyone who's fascinated about it. Doesn't matter where you live in the world, it's fun to be able to talk with people who share the same interest and fascination as you and I do. So that's all I got for today, guys. We'll be back with another episode in the next day or two. Thanks so much for tuning in. Leave me some ideas about what this could be, man, because I am drawing a blank. I have no real answers on this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Peace out.